Corey Erdman here with the Fight Network alongside the Hall of Famer, Mr. Al Bernstein, author of 30 Years, 30 Undeniable Truths About Sports, TV, and Boxing. Al, with everything you have going on, how did you even have time to write the book?
You know what? I wrote this book. If this book is incoherent, it's because, which I hope it isn't, it's because I wrote it between 11 o'clock and 2 in the morning because I'd be home and, you know, between all the boxing channel business and Showtime and going on the road, it was written on airplanes and very late at night. So that was when I did it. Yeah, I know. I was crazy to undertake it, wasn't I? But I'm very happy with the results, so I'm thrilled I did it.
No, I think everyone who reads it learns something about you, and I guess that was probably one of your goals, and they learn that you have interests outside of boxing as well. Some of it reads as kind of a how-to for future broadcasters. Do you think that maybe they should take after you, and that you have other interests, and maybe you have a broader scope when you get into broadcasting?
It's an interesting point. I just happen to have an eclectic set of interests. You know, you're referring to, among other things, I did musical act in Vegas, used to do a lot of music, and I competed in celebrity rodeos down in the U.S., which is a little different than most sportscasters. So I do have a lot of interest. But I think I do also devote a chapter of the book, as you know, to the state of sportscasting today, and it's meant more for the United States, I think, probably than Canada, because I see that more often, although you're doing a lot of the broadcasters up here, because I think it's more rampant in the United States. This idea of people hijacking events and making themselves bigger than the event and being so opinionated as to leave analysis and fact behind. That's a real epidemic in the United States in sportscasting. And I chose to write about it, and I'm not a controversial figure. I'm not one of these guys who's always looking to pick a fight, but I felt the need to do that. And I aptly point out in the book that, you know, Don Dunphy, the great broadcaster from the 40s and 50s and 60s, who became a mentor to me when I met him later in life, he said the biggest piece of advice I have for you is when you're doing an event, it's not about you. And as I point out in the book, the problem is, for a lot of people, it's always about them. And so I mixed in some of that into it just because I thought it was intriguing. But my main goal of writing the book was really to write about the people and places that I've covered.
A couple funny things I mentioned, or that I noticed in the book, pardon me, is that, number one, you're a lifelong Cubs fan.
Yes.
But in your list of people that you've worked with Hawk Harrelson on a broadcast. How have you managed to contain yourself as a Cubs fan?
I know, that was hard. He's actually a very nice guy. And I don't hate the White Sox like most Cub fans do, right? I actually I grew up on the southwest side of Chicago, but I would go out to Comiskey Park and sit there, and I know you're a big baseball fan, and you know the White Sox very well because they're in a division with your beloved Tigers. A nice gift they handed the Tigers this year. But I would go to Comiskey Park and sit in on a night game and freeze my tush off, and then watch the Sox win 2-1 when Joel Horland pitched a 7-hitter. There was a guy walked, stole at second, was sacrificed to third, and then scored on a ground ball. And that was the only run they'd get, to be a 1-0 game or 2-1 or whatever. Then I went out to Wrigley Field in the sunshine and watched the Cubs lose 17-9. And I thought, well, this is much more fun, you know. And so I became a Sox fan, or a Cubs fan. But I don't begrudge the Sox. Now, for Hawk Harrelson, this was years and years ago when I was doing something for Sports Fish in Chicago, and he was doing the White Sox games. And he came and did a fight, you know, and it was fun, actually. He's a very, very fun guy. And on that list, as you notice, I had Mr. T did a fight with me. There were all kinds of intriguing lists. You, of course, are on that list because you and I did a fight together. And I've had the pleasure of working with some of the great broadcasters of all time, and some of the more interesting ones as well.
Did Hawk cheer for the Chicago fighter in that fight by chance?
He's kind of known as a homer, isn't he? Yeah, just a little bit. No, he was able to retain his objectivity, just like he does on Sox games, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Since you've written the book and since you've had a chance to kind of relive your career and go back a little bit, you made a couple lists, as everyone likes to make.
I did make a few lists, yeah.
Specifically the list of your favorite fights that you've called, or the greatest fights that you've called. Have you gone back and said, maybe I forgot one or two, but have you called so many?
Oh, yeah. Well, I point out in there that I've done like a zillion fights, or at least 3/4 of a zillion. And And it's very hard to narrow it down. I narrowed it down to 5. And I pointed out, you know, when I made the list, that I'm not a good list maker. First of all, I hate people getting mad at me. And if you make a list, somebody's mad at you, right? And I said, unlike most Americans, I'm not that judgmental. In America, we have to have lists. We have to make judgments on things. And I point out that I like to consider myself a third Canadian and a third British and a third, you know, American. Now, the Canadian part is my mother was born in Canada, and I love coming to Canada. So I just decided I'm adopting the country, whether you want it or not. I just adopted.
You just want the health care.
Yeah, yes, that's exactly what I'd like. Yes, precisely. Health care and open-minded societies appeal to me. What can I tell you? So then I say I'm the third British, though, is complete nonsense. I have no claim to that. I just like the UK. But since I'm an American, I got to make lists. So I made some lists, and I made the best fights. And the top 5 I had as number 1, the Castillo-Corrales fight, number 1. Tommy Hearns against Marvin Hagler, of course, which is a great fight. I did the third. I did all 4 of the Marquez Vasquez fights, and I took the third one because it was the longest of all the fights. And I made that one in one of my top lists. And then an old cult classic, Caveman Lee against Johnny LaCicero. Now, you probably saw clips of that at some point, even though you were much too young to see it.
Seen the whole thing.
I don't know if you were born when it was on live. No, you were not. How about that's sad. Corey wasn't born when I did this fight. Now I'm going to go kill myself. But no, it was a great fight on the old ESPN series. So yeah, there are at least 4 or 5 more that I could make a case putting in there.
Was Caveman Lee, John LaCicero, the hottest arena you've ever been in, including outdoor venues?
It was, yeah, that's a very good point. And including it when you include outdoor venues and you say it's the hottest, that's really something. It was a nightclub in the 20 Grand Showroom in Detroit in August. No air conditioning. No air conditioning. And the place was packed with about 2,000 people. We thought we were going to faint at ringside. It was so hot. Can you imagine getting in there and boxing? And they put together one, I believe it was the 5th round of the fight, one of the wildest rounds I've ever seen. LaCicero got knocked down pretty early in the round and just barely beat the count. Gets up, and Caveman Lee was a little too aggressive, got hit with a big overhand right. John LaCicero landed, and I'm not exaggerating, about 25 unanswered punches. And somehow, Caveman Lee got through that and then knocked LaCicero down in that round. So it was pretty extraordinary.
Well, you mentioned a moment ago that you don't like to make people angry. And I've noticed that you don't often get angry on broadcasts very often. But I do want to ask you about the one time I noticed that you did get angry, and that's during Abner Mares and Joseph Agbeko. Was that just kind of your ultimate boiling point, that you'd seen enough after 30 years, this is it?
Somebody mentioned, a couple of people wrote that. They said, they were talking about, you know, the referee, and they said, you know, when you make Al Bernstein that mad, you must have done something really wrong, you know, because for the most part, I don't do that in the air. Yeah, that was a rough one. That, of course, was when all those low blows had been landed by Abner Mares, and the referee just did almost nothing about it and was looking at the one low blow that scored a knockdown of Agbeko. And he was right in front of it, looking at the low blow, and did not call it. So yeah, that's probably the one broadcast where I got as crazy as any I've ever been on. I can't really remember getting that nuts on a broadcast.
So after 30 years, and we're here in Quebec as we're filming this, we're about to call a fight here at the Holiday Inn in Pointe Claire. Do you still get excited for shows like this, having called the fights of the magnitude that you've been at? Do you still get excited for ones like this?
Yeah, you know why? Because it's the process is fun. You know, we sat down and we talked to a bunch of these young men who are boxers. I think they're all, you know, I'm pretty sure you'll agree with me. Boxers are a really great bunch of guys for the most part. You know, I think it's a misnomer that some people have because they make their living hitting people. This group of guys we talked to today, you'd be happy to have any of those people as your neighbor. You know, it would be fine. I like the process. I enjoy working. A perfect example is I get a chance to do this broadcast with you. You're an up-and-coming broadcaster who I think is going to do great things. I like the idea of interacting with somebody different while you're doing a broadcast, and I love the idea of doing television. So for me, every boxing match, just like any other sport I've covered, I mean, everything has its own story to tell. And if that's what you enjoy, then there's no reason that one should be more important than the other.
Well, moving forward, people will have no trouble finding you, obviously, on Showtime and pretty much everywhere they look. But where can they find the book?
The book is available on Amazon.com, both as a ebook and also as a print book. Also, BarnesandNoble.com. That's the best place to go and get it. And a wonderful stocking stuffer as we head toward Christmas. Was that shameless enough?
No, not at
Oh,
all.
okay.
No. Al Bernstein, stocking stuffer expert, Hall of Famer, Corey Erdman for the Fight Network.